Fishing. At one point, it was the whole reason for Brexit when it wasn't about trade or immigration or sovereignty. Like I say, back in the day in 2016, Brexit could be about anything you wanted because it was just an amorphous blob that was being sold. And of course, I don't know how many times we've talked about it since then, even back since 2016, that the whole thing, especially when it came to fishermen, they were being used by Farage wholesale. I have said it numerous times. Farage was not the fisherman friend. I mean, where's he been since not only 2016, but even 2020? He's had next to nothing to do with fishermen. If anything, the main ire of fishermen should be pointed at Nigel Farage for selling them down the river. Well, for selling them Brexit. Yeah. But here's the reality. The reality is for fishermen is that those that are left are in an incredibly now changing industry. The industry has moved from one of purely catching the fresh fish and selling them on the day to now more processing that now happens on the land. That is now where the vast majority of the money to be made in the fishing industry is. Get the fish, get it on land, get it to these processing centers, bish bash bosh. That's where the money is made. And of course, even more so, small boats, which is the predominant mode of most of these fishing fleets that you now see, or at least the fishermen that are complaining about being sold down the river by Brexit, etc., is now really seen as inefficient. Why? Because you can have a small boat that, as we'll see in a moment, will only catch so much, but a medium one will catch more than a small boat, but still remain under quota compared to a large boat. So medium boats are more and more being seen in the industry as a way to go and, do the most efficient catches they can possibly do. So, you know, this is just one of those things of it is changing times, changing technologies. Everything is changing in the industry, and these fishermen who are complaining about being sold down the river are refusing to admit that times are changing, that they are being left in the past, and that they can't get with the times. Now, should the government step in and help them? Absolutely. We've seen France, Belgium, the Netherlands, countries who have these fishing fleets do step in and help their fishermen to make that transition to a more to the future where they are, as we've talked about now. Has our government stepped in to do that over 14 years? Has Farage ever campaigned to facilitate a movement like that? No, of course he hasn't. But that's the real reason for a lot of the fishermen's gripes, especially UK fishermen. It is almost as we've seen back many, many years. Look at the complaints of metal workers, whatever, old industries that sort of saw this big sort of industrial transition. This is exactly the same way that they are complaining about it as most of these fishermen are complaining about today. And we're about to see a lot of that take place as well. So before we do get into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, there is the YouTube thank you button and the Pony Club down below as well. So please do go check those out. It does help support the channel. And of course, as always, let's crack on into this. So this comes from the BBC, with the title of Fishermen Sold Down the River by Brexit. So a Cornish fisherman who voted for Brexit said the fleet had now been sold down the river because foreign boats were still fishing near the coast. So Cornish MP Steve Dribble raised the issue in Parliament this week by saying that the under 10 millimeter fleet was now sadly in decline and had been losing more than 100 vessels each year. Yes, because these smaller boats, as we'd said, just really not efficient and don't really fit into the modern industrialized fishing that we are seeing. These small boats fit into this very old style pastoral, years gone by fishing that just does not exist anymore, that cannot help feed this new industrial machine industry that is now there, that is now the dominant factor of the industry. So the former director of the new Under 10 Fishermen's Association, which then disbanded last month, said that the foreign-owned boats just, quote, scoop up all the fish in an area to 12 from area from 6 to 12 miles from the coast. And they are well within their rights to do so. There's nothing wrong with them doing that because, as we've said, fish do not respect boundaries. There is no such thing as like a fish carrying a passport. There's no such thing as a, quote, British fish. But there you go. Anyway, Jen Perry from the NUFTA said that about 80% of the UK fleet was small boats, but they had only had access to about 3% of the fishing quota. Because even if they have more access to a fishing quota, they then cannot catch it. There is no point allocating these small boats a bigger section of the fishing quota because they cannot catch it. Remember, it takes about a week for one of these small boats to do what a medium-sized boat can do in a day. And that's it done. It doesn't need to go back out. It maybe needs to go like out once, twice a week to sort of get its job done, where these small boats would have to go out every single day. And even then, they cannot sort of go and fulfill that quota themselves. So all these, when fishermen complain about, fishing quota, etc., they're all complaining about stuff they know they cannot fulfill. You've also got the government themselves here selling the quota to foreign vessels, or at least, with UK basing rights, because they can actually fulfill that quota. There's a whole thing that they are complaining about. As we said, it's a completely changing industry, and they cannot get with the time. Now, you might say that, that's unfair, but they can't actually do it. They cannot compete against these more newer, more advanced boats that have like fishing radars and all this stuff, because they just can't. It's just they've been out technologied in many ways by this. So here he says, so he said the announcement of their closure had been because that they could not see a future for the industry because of the foreign fleet's ability to catch huge quantities of fish. He said there is no effective catch limits for these boats. That's not true. There is, but there you go. So you've got this huge bunch of very powerful vessels fishing in uncontrolled ways in our waters, to the detriment of our guys who cannot just seem to get out there and can't get out to sea, and watching all these foreign vessels just scoop up all the fish, he said. Again, that's not true. They have their vessels. They are controlled. There are rules around that. What's the big thing that most fishermen would complain about? They complain about, fishing rules and regulations, because they used to enjoy the days where they used to just throw out all their nets and just catch however much they wanted, because times have changed and they cannot get with these times. Anyway, Martin Gilbert, who fishes mainly shellfish in Newquay Harbour, voted for Brexit and said that the current deal had, quote, sold us down the river. Because even Boris Johnson was not going to go to bat to risk destroying the rest of the UK economy for an industry that generates, I think, as roughly the same amount of GDP as Harrods. It's like less than, 1%. Are we going to risk the entire economy for these guys? No. No one in their right mind would do that. Even Boris Johnson, as mad and as crazy as he wasn't going to do that. He said, so the French, the Belgian, the Spanish have all got the majority of the quota, he said. We're still going to get past the French to fish in our own waters. He said that's not right. That's not true as well, because they have quoted from the UK, but you notice he's not bringing that up. St Austin and the New Quill MP, Mr. Double, said in Parliament this week, the hope and expectation was the result of leaving the EU would gain back control of our waters, that we would have an opportunity to grow. Again, that was never really going to happen. Once again, they were missold a dream that was never going to happen. Speaking on BBC Radio Cornwall, he said, we've got to get better control. We haven't got all we wanted. Well, you never going to get that anyway, because it was just a complete fantasy that was sold by the Leave campaign, and in particular, Nigel Farage. And unfortunately, fishermen have been gobbling all that up, hook, line, and sinker, because they've been promised this once again return to this golden age where they could just go out and fish however much they wanted, regardless of whatever happens to their own environment, despite how much fishermen will say about, oh, but we want to make sure fishing is done in a sustainable way. They want to go back to the days where it wasn't sustainable. Let's make that very, very clear. So, responding in Parliament, the Minister for Department, Food and Environmental Affairs, Mark Spencer, said that we've heard from the inshore fleet about what they want. And they said there's an imbalance between what they see as their fair share. We will try and continue to listening to those representations to try and find a way through. Mark Gibbleton's son Dan, who also fishes out as Newquay, has amassed over 20,000 followers on TikTok by sharing his videos of life at sea. He says, quote, the big boats, they just get away with it. And we're the ones getting penalized. I've got 600 pots. They've got 4,000. What does that tell you? Well, they can fish more than you because they're bigger. They're able to do it. And it's not that they're getting away with it. They've probably got the quota to be able to do that. They've got the manpower. They've got the boat. They've got the onshore capability able to do that. And yet, still, these fishermen are making the exact same arguments they made prior to Brexit. Like I say, they were sold a dream. They were sold false promises, even more so. And until they realize that it was those people misselling them this dream of a fantasy that they could just magically go back to, nothing's really going to change for them. And they've got to come to that realization that they were sold a false promise, a false fantasy, that they cannot just simply go back to that. So under the UK-EU Trade Cooperation Agreement, the UK and the EU have rights for access to fishing for specific parts of each other's waters between 6 and 12 nautical miles from the coast under certain conditions. Mr. Doble said that as we approach the 5-year anniversary of Brexit and the chance to renegotiate, we need to take more control. Well, that's not going to happen because who is going to risk the entire rest of the UK economy for, as I said, something that's Harrods? Are we going to really do that to something that we can have another Harrods? It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. And they cannot understand the technological changes that have happened, the changes in the market, the fact that UK as a whole, one of the big problems that is affecting them, and they themselves can't admit, the UK now eats less fish than it used to. You've seen fish consumption fall drastically. On the continent, that's a different option. They also now cannot sell to the continent as easy as they used to because of Brexit. They won't admit to that either, but there you go. So it is all on them, and they've got to come to the realization. And you do see this every so often. There are fishermen who've come out and said, well, actually, yeah, we were sold a false promise. We were lied to by the Leave campaign, by these Brexiteers. And until that becomes the majority opinion, until you start seeing the fishermen dumping all their rotting fish on Nigel Farage's on Nigel Farage's driveway, which should happen. What a coup that would be if we could somehow engineer that to happen. Nothing's going to change. But there you go. So anyway, as always, remember Farage was never the fisherman's friend. He used you because you were a convenient tool to use. Fishing was never going to be this big dreamland that was sold to you by the Leave campaign, by Brexit, even by Farage, etc. No one in their right mind would risk the rest of the UK economy for your industry that is worth less than 0.1% of the UK GDP. I'm sorry, guys, that's the breaks. Your industry has fundamentally changed. It is more modernized, it is more mechanized more than ever. Small boats are just not the way to go. Medium-sized ones are. But there you go. There is, of course, more stuff in play as weird, but we've talked about that plenty of times. And like I say, we're already going on for 15 minutes at this point. If not, we'd be even longer talking about the full details and everything that's going on. But trust me, once again, these fishermen aren't telling the whole truth about what's going on, about what they've signed up to, about what they really want to do, etc., etc. It's always the case. But there you go. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.